at UFC Gold. Jones looking for his 5th title defense.
UFC fighters' salaries have often caused controversy and confusion, even though the UFC has made earnings available to the public. That is only accounted for the base salary and bonuses, with the real number remaining hidden for those fighters who get a piece of the pay-per-view and other undisclosed contract parts. Also, the UFC has often been criticized for not paying their fighters enough, and that those who are not on the top can barely make ends meet. But that's a story for another video. In this one, we're going to go over those fighters whose fists and feet are in the millions. But before we get into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. Number 10, Daniel Cormier. DC was supposed to retire last year when he turned 40 because he had already accumulated enough wealth through fighting, commentary, and other various ventures. But, as he said himself, Dana White can be quite convincing, and DC couldn't resist a couple more bags full of dollars from the UFC's boss. As of now, Cormier has made $5,726,000 from his UFC base salary and fight bonuses. That's the amount without pay-per-view bonuses and other endorsements. DC has competed in 9 title fights in the UFC, and 7 of those fights were on pay-per-view, with over 3.5 million buys overall. So the real number in DC's bank account is a lot bigger than 5.76 million. But as we said before, the UFC doesn't have that information available for public knowledge. Rumor has it that DC pocketed $4 million total for his title fight with Derek Lewis in November 2018. But if that's true, he probably had double or triple that in the 2 occasions he fought against Jon Jones, which was one of the most popular events in the history of the company due to the hatred and rivalry Jones and Cormier had. All in all, Cormier is a very rich man, and deservedly so. Number 9, Donald Cerrone. With just under $6 million in earnings, the man known as Cowboy sits at number 9 on this list of highest paid UFC fighters. Just like with DC and everybody else, we don't know how much Cerrone has actually made. We only know the base salary plus the fight bonuses, and there have been plenty of those for the Cowboy, as he is holding a record for most post-fight bonus awards in UFC history with 18. Unlike some of the other highest paid fighters, Cerrone didn't headline big pay-per-view events, so this number of $5.93 million is closer to reality, even though he has always been very good and holds numerous UFC records for most fights, wins, and knockdowns. Cerrone has never been a marquee name in the fight game. He's appeared in only 1 title fight, which he lost, but his consistency and attractive way of fighting has put him in the top 10 earners of all time. Yeehaw! Number 8, Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt is one of the most beloved fighters in the MMA community due to his honest approach towards the fans and opponents and leaving his heart out in the octagon. He is also one of the most tenured MMA fighters ever, and his career dates back to the glory days of Pride in the early 2000s. His UFC career started in 2011, although that is quite a long time later, and he collected a handful of performance bonuses during the decade. He wasn't earning that much money at first, however that all changed in 2016 in UFC 200, where he fought the infamous Brock Lesnar, one of the most attractive fighters in the history of the promotion. Lesnar has always been the money fight. That's why Hunt earned $700,000 in base salary for fighting. After that, he never fought for less ever again, with each of his final 5 fights netting him over $750,000. Overall, he's officially made $6.3 million in the UFC. Number 7, Jon Jones. Jon Jones' official UFC earnings is $6.48 million total. Wait, what? One of the most dominant and famous fighters in the history of MMA has earned only $6.5 million over 25 fights? Get out of here. Well, yeah, it's true. While Donald Cerrone's and Mark Hunt's earnings are somewhat close to the official career earnings, Jones is in a galaxy far, far away when it comes to pocketing cash from the UFC. Due to the fact that he's become the youngest champion in the history of the UFC at age 23, and that he hasn't been defeated in the octagon, all of his fights from 2011 onward have been title fights, because he has been getting a cut in pay-per-view buys since 2011, and he has had 13 pay-per-view fights. He is one of the biggest overall earners in the history of the UFC. Jones's fights have sold over 7 million pay-per-views, and that's why Jon usually accepts his deal at around $500,000 to show up. And that's the money that the UFC will tell us about. We can only imagine what the real number is, but it's certainly not peanuts. Number 6, Georges St. Pierre. Almost identical to Jon Jones, GSP was usually earning between $400,000 to $500,000 fixed dollars per bout. Like Jones, St. Pierre was also fighting and winning a lot of title fights, and the two men share the record with the most wins in title fights at 13. GSP has been a part of of 14 pay-per-view events, usually as the main attraction, which means he got the most dollars in his heyday, which lasted from 2005 to 2013. He was one of the most popular fighters in the UFC, and reportedly he earned up to $5 million per fight. Officially, his earnings stand at just over $7 million, and that's largely due to the fact he got $2.5 million to come out of retirement to fight Michael Bisping in 2017. It has been rumored that GSP will step into the octagon once again, this time against Khabib Nurmagomedov. If that bout comes to fruition, St. Pierre would be interested in it because of legacy, challenge, and love for fighting, because he doesn't really need money anymore. Number 5. Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping doesn't fall into the superstar category. He's more like Donald Cerrone, and the fact that he was really good for a long time and fought often. Unlike Cerrone, Bisping did capture the UFC gold with a stunning victory over Luke Rockhold at UFC 199. His career earnings are $7,135,000. He was a part of 4 pay-per-views as the main event, most notably against George St. Pierre, which sold 875,000 pay-per-views. So it's fair to guess that Bisping got a piece of that pie as a champion, even though GSP was the bigger draw. While he was often doubted as a fighter, but had the aura of a loser at the most important moments, Bisping did get his shine at the twilight of his career and secured his future in the process. He remains one of the best and funniest characters the UFC has had in recent years, which serves him well in his current career as a commentator. Number 4. Anderson Silva. Watching Anderson Silva fight in his prime was a thing of beauty. His baiting and counterpunching was second to none, and he was the most dominant fighter that the middleweight division has ever seen. At the beginning of his career, Silva was netting around $200,000 per fight, which increased to $600,000 during his championship years, up until the end of his career, which is now, even though Silva is not officially retired and might give it another go in the octagon. However, he doesn't need the money. Like fellow dominant forces Jones and GSP, Anderson was a pay-per-view sensation. He holds the UFC's record for most pay-per-view fights with 19. Those events sold over 9.5 million pay-per-views overall, so it's only left to imagine how much he really made in the octagon. One thing is for sure, Anderson Silva is a wealthy man, and he's earned much more than the official number of $8,112,000, which puts him just outside the top 3 in official earnings. Number 3. Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib Nurmagomedov is a household name in 2020 and is one of the best and most known fighters on the planet. Since he is from Russia, which numbers over 150 million people, he has always had a big following. Joe Rogan once mentioned on his podcast that whenever he posts something, he gets a ton of comments from Russian fans saying Khabib time, insinuating that their prodigy should get a shot at the title. When he finally got a shot at the title, he seized it and won the belt against Al Iaquinta at UFC 223. That was his first bigger payday in the company, as he earned $530,000 for the victory, which is more than he made in his first 9 fights combined. Of course, what made Khabib jump some more of the seasoned fighters on this list is what happened after he became champion. We're talking about the rivalry with Conor McGregor and their fight at UFC 229. Khabib got paid $2 million for the fight officially, and even though he got fined $500,000 for jumping the cage, it's still one of the most significant fight earnings for a fighter ever. As you can probably guess by now, that amount was only a portion of what Khabib actually earned. Considering that UFC 229 was the best-selling pay-per-view in the history of the sport, with 2,400,000 pay-per-view buys, pay-per-view cost was $55 to $65, the event sold more than $150 million in pay-per-view alone. The fighters got a chunk of that, with most going to McGregor. Then there was his most recent fight in Abu Dhabi against Dustin Poirier. There, Nurmagomedov got the highest official salary in the history of the UFC, with $6 million to show up. In his last 3 fights, he earned over $8 million, and in the 9 fights before that, he made $500,000, which adds to $8,680,000 in official earnings. This is a prime example of how you need to get to the top to get the big bucks as a UFC fighter. Number 2. Alistair Overeem. Another household name, the ever-popular Reem is in at number 2 with over $9.5 million in official earnings, once one of the biggest stars in the sport. This Dutch fighter has fought in many memorable and high-grossing events, most notably against Brock Lesnar in his UFC debut. After Lesnar, he also faced former champions Frank Mir, Junior Dos Santos, Fabricio Verdum, and other many notable names. You name a UFC heavyweight, there's a good chance that Overeem has fought him. Well, why does he keep doing that? Well, it's not for good health, that's for sure. Reem gets paid over $800,000 per fight nowadays. That has been the case for the last last 10 fights dating back to when he was fighting Andrei Arlovsky back in 2016. He may not be as good as he once was, and someone says horse meat, but he's still one of the most popular fighters UFC has on its roster, and he's banking on that fact. Given that his fighting career dates back to 1999, his retirement could come soon enough. But then again, if you were making almost $1 million a show up, would you retire? Number 1. Conor McGregor. The notorious, the most famous man in the history of the sport and the biggest star in and out of the octagon, is the highest earner in the UFC, and deservedly so. He accomplished so much in a relatively short amount of time, which was unprecedented for a UFC fighter, being excited and shouting, "Dana, 60 G's, baby!" After winning a performance bonus in one of his earliest fights, he rose to a global megastar. His total official earnings say that he's made just over $12 million in fight purses, but of course, as we mentioned above, that doesn't count the pay-per-view, and he is an absolute pay-per-view record breaker. It has been speculated that he earned around $50 million for the Khabib fight alone, and even though he has only been in 6 pay-per-view events in his relatively short career, they were bought over 9 million times total, which is approximately worth $500 million in profit for the company. Just on pay-per-views, it's no wonder he got paid that much, and he deserves every penny. Well, McGregor is done, is unmatched, and it actually helped other fighters to start earning more money as well after they have seen what is possible. Conor will further increase his lead as the highest paid fighter with future fights to come. Should he be triumphant in those, he may rematch with Khabib as well, which will be another pay-per-view stunner and will put more dollars into the Irishman's already deep pockets. And with that, we wrap the video.